Hey, how's everyone doing? I am not super familiar with this yet. I am using StreamYard on a laptop this time instead of on my phone. So I am checking to see if I can find. Okay, yes, there's a number of live viewers right there. Hey, welcome everybody. Last time I was told that the comments came in a little delayed, so I'm going to try to keep up with those and try to answer those as soon as I see them. But I am trying to keep on top of all of that. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Hello, Beulah. Hello, Lotus Fong. Good to see you all. Glad you're joining me again for this live stream. This is also a new mic that I'm working with, so let me know if the levels are a little low, if I need to switch over to using the laptop's mic, or if you can hear me okay here. Hey, Natalie. Welcome to the live stream. Glad you're here. Hello, Swanky. Audio sounds great. Thank you. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll just give it a couple minutes here. Welcome, everybody. I hope, depending on where you are in the country or maybe out of the country, I hope you're having a good evening or a good night, whatever it is for you. Welcome to the live stream. So I'll just go over what we're going to be doing today. Going to give some channel updates. I have some exciting news. Does Kitty like the new mic? Let me see if he's around. See if he. Oh, there he is. You want to say something into the mic, Kitty? So yes, we're going to go over some channel updates, some news for the channel, and some new directions that we're heading in. We will be talking about grief today. Like I promised a couple of weeks ago, we were interrupted by Halloween. I'm not used to having a holiday on a Tuesday, so I didn't account for that, but we're going to be talking about grief today, how we can cope with grief, how we can handle grief. And we will talk about how to use the ACT model. Someone mentioned the ACT model. That was probably, nope, I don't remember who it was last time, who talked about acceptance and commitment therapy being a big part of grief work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can use that and utilize some of the principles there to handle grief and cope with it. We'll do some Q&A, and then I would like to end with some mindfulness exercises. So this is a little different. I'm not going to be doing a reading today, but it will be mindfulness and meditation based. So we'll do a little guided thing at the end here. He's getting blocked by the mic. Here, you want to hang over on this side? I don't know. He looks a little antsy today, so I don't know how long he's actually going to hang out. Yeah, let me take a look here. All right. Oh, nice. This is pretty cool. We're going to transition to talking about some channel updates. So the first thing is I've finalized what we're doing in terms of membership. And this cat. Okay. So we have two tiers of membership. We have the original tier that we already had. That's $4.99 a month. And what that is that comes with all the emotes and the badges, all that good stuff. As well as I gave you all a sample earlier this week, I think, on the community tab of journal prompts that I'll be sending out monthly. So each month I will send you a file if you are a member of 4 journal prompts, 1 per week of the month. And this is for you to be able to journal, think through and sort through your beliefs and your emotions, how you're interacting with them, what your relationship is with those emotions, and to be able to further your mental health journey in that way. It's not supposed to be a replacement for therapy, but a supplement for whatever therapeutic and mental health work you're doing on your own in your journey. We also open up a 99-cent tier, which is awesome because I don't think anything is less than $1 anymore. I grew up on the dollar menu at McDonald's. That doesn't exist anymore. We went to the dollar store the other day. That's not really the dollar store anymore. That's the $1.25 store. So for 99 cents a month, you get access to the badges, access to the emotes that you can use in chat, use in comments, all of that stuff. And I'll also be able to look out for those badges in the comments section. So I will be able to single out those comments and be able to respond to those more immediately and identify those quicker to be able to engage with you in the comments. So those are the two tiers of membership that we have. And so I would invite you to check out that membership page and sign up if you'd like to support the channel. The second thing that I wanted to announce was that I have started recording some of our guest podcasts. So I'm not going to be the only person on the screen anymore in some of these videos. Well, barring Kitty, he's been on the screen a good bit. And so I've already done one with a marriage and family therapist, and we're going to be talking about parent burnout and how to talk to your teenagers. A lot of really helpful, applicable stuff that she shared. And I'm just in the editing process of that. So I'm excited to get that out to you all soon. I also have some videos in the works collaborating with other mental health professionals. We're going to do a video on EMDR. We're going to do one on neurofeedback. And I also want to get someone who does yoga so I can try some yoga and see how that affects mental health wise. I haven't found out how to do that yet. I could just always default to doing a video on YouTube and following along with that, but I'd like to get an actual person to be able to interview them about that. So that's kind of what we're looking at in the future in terms of future videos and guest appearances. Okay, Kitty is, I think, done for tonight, but I'll try to bring him back later if you all want him. He's getting hair all over the place too. So I'm going to take a pause here and give the comments a little time to refresh, make sure I'm not missing any comments. If you all have any feedback or thoughts at this point, please go ahead and put those in the comments. Okay. According to my panel, I'm not seeing any new comments. So hopefully that is actually the case. Like I said, this is a new platform for me, and this is StreamYard connected to my YouTube account. So I'm hoping that the comments are coming in clearly. But yeah, let's go on to talking about coping with grief. So, a little bit of background. One of the things that I did as I was researching was actually, it actually came about really just kind of accidentally. We're doing homeschool, and we were reading a little book on ancient Egypt and talking about the mummification process. Obviously, that happens after somebody dies, and this is for like wealthy members of society who actually got mummified. But what I found interesting is that historically, there was just a lot of communal and religious aspects around the process of dying and the process of grieving and mourning. And so there was a very public aspect to that where the family, the priests, and all of the people who are connected to this person would be going through that grieving process together that was very organized around the religious rituals of mummification, making sure that this person would transition well into the afterlife. Now, of course, depending on your religious beliefs, that may not apply. And depending on how connected someone is to people around them, that also may not apply. But I thought that was really interesting as a contrast between how we handle grief now, which at least in America seems to be a very time limited thing. Like you have, I don't know, like maybe 2 weeks, a month from your employer off from work to be able to grieve if someone close to you dies. And then you're supposed to come back and just be fine. Or doing a lot of grief by ourselves instead of um, in community. You know, we're trying to not show people that we're suffering or struggling. What do you think of death doulas? Okay, I want to. Oh, that's pretty cool that I can do that. My guess from what that sounds like, I'm not actually really familiar, so this might be something that I want to look into. Someone who partners along with you in that grief, and who walks with you through that healing and grieving process. Um, if I'm reading that right, I guess I could go Google that really quick. Um, yeah, you know what? Let me play around with this. Let me see if I can do a screen share. I'm playing around with this a little bit too much, but um, let me see if I can do this. Nope, that's not working. Anyways, um, if my read was right on what a death doula is, if my guess was right, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about my guess. Um, I think that sounds awesome. Someone who specializes in the work of grief. I think a lot of the attraction of birth doulas is that they really specialize in this area, whereas like an OB might be kind of more generalized in their work. That doulas are really about supporting the mother in the process and being able to be there and be very present and not as focused on all the extra stuff that goes around birth. And so if you have someone like that for death, I think that can just only be a bonus. Again, I had never heard of that, but really having someone dedicated to you as you're going through that process, I think can be super important and super helpful. So, positive and negative grief. Okay. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. Um, because that's really what goes into the ACT model. And I think what our culture says about grief is that there's actually a point where it becomes negative just by virtue of it lasting too long. And so a lot of times with our work, with our family, with our friends, we we start trying to push that grief away because we feel like we'll bring everyone down, or we should be past it by now, or things like that, or we should just be going back to work and we shouldn't be thinking about the person that we lost anymore. And so I think that's actually when it turns into negative grief, when we have an unhealthy relationship with grief. Like I said, I'll touch on that more when we talk about ACT. Physical effects of grief. Yeah, so the most recent DSM actually took away the bereavement exclusion, where in the DSM 4, again, okay, so the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders, which is basically how we define mental health disorders. So in the DSM 4, the previous version, there was actually a bereavement exclusion where if someone was mourning or grieving, you actually could not diagnose them with depression until there was a certain time period that passed, because some of the things like loss of motivation, loss of enjoyment, low energy, low mood, depressed mood, irritation, all of those things could look a lot like depression, but were actually grief. I actually think it'd be helpful to bring that back so that we're not stigmatizing grief and calling it depression. But a lot of the symptoms can be similar. So let me talk a little bit about acceptance and commitment therapy. Someone had brought it up last time as one of the go-to methods for dealing, well, not dealing, with coping with grief. And so I wanted to share a couple things here, and you all can see that I've been playing around with this. Okay, so going back to the Egypt thing, that was a picture I found of Egypt, but just kind of illustrating the communal and religious concepts that provided a framework for people to grieve and also to provide a structure and a meaning throughout. Those are super important as we're talking about how to grieve well and how to heal from grief. But yeah, let me remove the banners real quick so you can actually see the entire thing. Okay, let me remove that as well. Okay, so this, for anyone who has any training in acceptance and commitment therapy, this will look really familiar to you. For anyone else, it looks super confusing and not all that helpful, but I'll go through it really quickly. It's called the hexaflex, so hexagon, right? And the thing in the middle, psychological flexibility, is what we are striving for within the ACT model. And what it is, it's not a linear thing. As you can see, everything connects to everything else. And what happens is that we utilize different parts of the hexaflex and kind of move between those, usually with the guidance of a therapist, to be able to attain psychological flexibility, which is not just prescribed or breaking free from the patterns that we're used to. And so when we're thinking about grief, I think a good example is that the patterns that we're used to are that I start thinking, maybe I'm at work and a wave of grief hits me, and I think, I shouldn't be like this at work. I got to keep it together. People are counting on me. Maybe I'm bringing down the mood of the entire meeting or of the workplace. And then I try to push away that feeling of grief. And so, what I might do if someone came to me with that example in a session is that, okay, let's look at the top piece of the hexaflex, attention to the present moment. Let me pay attention to just what I'm feeling. And maybe there might be physical sensations like Beulah was talking about. Maybe I feel like I can't catch my breath, or I feel like crying, things like that. And and so some of that might be perpetuated by these thoughts of, this is inappropriate at work. This is inappropriate at work. I can't be doing this. I should be over it by now. And those are all thoughts that we have that we think we have to act on. So I have to pull it together. I have to not do this right now. And that's actually creating more stress, creating more fear and avoidance for us. And so we might move to diffusion. So diffusion is when we can separate our thoughts from actions. We don't have to act on our thoughts. I can have a thought and have it stay a thought. I can have the thought that um, I really miss this person while at work, or I can feel that way, and I don't have to do anything with that. I can just pay attention. I can just pay attention to it, be aware of it, and allow myself to experience that feeling. It is very mindfulness based. And that's what some of that diffusion is about. Just being able to allow myself to have a thought without having to do something about it. And so when I defuse, then I can actually recognize myself as context. And that is actually one of the trickier parts of ACT, is that bottom piece, self as context. And so the best example that I've heard of self as context is thinking of our self, our core self, as a container that can handle all of our emotions and our thoughts, no matter how big, no matter how small. And the best metaphor is thinking of like an old school Pyrex bowl. And that sounds kind of funny, but stick with me through this. All right. So if we are, that's our self. Like, you know, those old school Pyrex bowls, you can do anything to them and they won't break, they won't shatter, whatever. Stick them in the oven, stick them in the freezer, put liquids, solids in them, whatever. And that's kind of the idea. Our self is that Pyrex container. We might have some really hot emotions in there at the moment. It can handle that. We might have some really cold thoughts or feelings. It can handle that. We can stick it in the oven, turn up the heat, turn up the pressure, and that's fine. It can survive that. And what we start recognizing is that those emotions are not ourselves. Ourselves are the context, self as context. Ourselves are the context for those thoughts and feelings to occur, and we can contain them, and ourself is big enough to handle those. And so once we realize that and our thoughts and our feelings don't seem as overwhelming, then we can move towards acceptance. We can move towards committed action that's in line with our values. So once we know, I care about my family, I care about the times that I miss being with this person, we can actually feel those emotions, accept that we miss them, accept that we're grieving, and then be able to take committed action. Maybe that is by doing some religious ritual, praying, or steal the Pyrex bowl analogy. Absolutely. It's not mine anyway, so you can feel free to steal it. I think it was in a training that I did through Pezzi on ACT. So if I think of the person's name, I'll tell you. But yeah, once we recognize like what our values are, then we can start acting in committed action in line with our values instead of just reacting to our thoughts and our feelings. So that's a really short, down and dirty kind of description of how ACT works. Again, it's very flexible. It is not a linear kind of model, as you can see with all the lines going back and forth. With a therapist, you would have a conversation and be kind of jumping from thing to thing based on what the needs are at the moment. So you might actually start with something like your values. You might identify what your values are. And then as you get into stressful events, to pay attention to the present moment, recognize yourself as context, all that stuff, and move towards acceptance. But again, all of this is about psychological flexibility, not reacting to um, how I'm thinking at the moment, but being able to be proactive and choose what I would like to do in this moment. Let me see. Does OBE that occurs during a violent event that leads to a tragic loss stop the normal grief process? Okay. Beulah, let me ask real quick. What does OBE stand for? And this might be something that I should know, but I'll address the rest of your question real quick. Something that occurs during a violent event that leads to a tragic loss stop the normal grief process. I would imagine that what you're talking about is trauma interacting with grief in this at this point. And that's a very individual kind of question. I couldn't say for sure. Some people you'll see. Well, let me back up and say this. Grief is going to look different for everybody. And if you have out of body experience, okay. Ooh, that's interesting. That would take some research on my part. I don't have a lot of experience with out of body experiences. I know that they happen. Yeah, I do wonder if, again, this is depending on your religious background, whether you're going to call it an out of body experience. Dissociation might be what the medical terminology might be for it. Um, I don't know how much I want to speak to that. I just know that that's something that happens. And so, yeah, when you're talking about trauma, that is dissociation is definitely something that happens with trauma. And it's tricky because we have a short term kind of acute stress disorder that is, I want to say 30 days or fewer, you're experiencing PTSD like symptoms, but you can't diagnose someone with PTSD until it's past that 30 days. So acute stress disorder is kind of like your temporary kind of carry through of like your experience, re-experiencing, avoiding triggers that that lead to you thinking or feeling like you're back in the moment. Difficulty with sleep, difficulty with your emotions, feelings of excessive guilt, all of those things. And that is tricky because grief can sometimes look like trauma symptoms as well. And so, again, like I was saying, if there's anything that you take away from this live stream, I want it to be that grief does not look the same way for everybody. And even for the same person, if you are grieving at two different points in your life, that might look different. I've had a lot of clients who feel really guilty about like, oh, I grieved this grandparent this way, and I'm not grieving the same way for this other grandparent who passed away now. Did I love one more than the other? No, you're not necessarily. You might, but that's not my point. Um, the point is that your grief just might look different. And that's why it's hard. And that's why I really push back against stigmatizing grief because it's so individual. Some people seem to move on quickly, some people seem not to. And that's not to say one is healthier than the other. Employers prefer one over the other, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily healthier. But yeah, so again, in regards to the out of body experience or the dissociative state, that would be something that depersonalization. Yeah. I don't know the neurology behind how dissociation or depersonalization works, but anecdotally, what I've heard from my clients is that for a lot of them, that was their way of their mind keeping them safe. That if they had that sense of distance from the traumatic event or whatever experience, that was how their mind protected them from having to feel the full force of that experience because that would give them some distance from it. And I do subscribe to that kind of theory where a lot of our responses to trauma are protective. there are bodies and our minds trying to keep us safe in a very abnormal situation. And so depersonalization, dissociation might be a way that our minds tend to do that. And I don't know well enough to be able to predict if someone will dissociate or feel depersonalization. And it's not even by a relative intensity of the event. Some people, I don't know. It's just a very individual kind of experience. And that's part of what makes mental health very fascinating, but also very frustrating for me because I wish I could give you all a more concrete answer. I might be someone who's better researched in these areas that could give you a more concrete answer, but I just don't have that for you all. Let's see. I think I'm caught up with comments right now, but I wanted to give a little pause. Does anyone have any questions about ACT? Again, I'm not an expert in it. I've done a couple of trainings with acceptance and commitment therapy, and I love how applicable it is to other situations beyond just grief. Um, yeah, so any questions or follow up that you all have about that before we kind of go into the general Q&A? Aaliyah, thanks for your comment and thanks for chiming in throughout. Um, yeah, depersonalization is something that, again, as someone who doesn't experience it, I can find it fascinating. I'm sure it's uncomfortable, and for a lot of people, they would prefer that it didn't happen to them. Okay, Molly, good question. I teach a lot of children. A lot of them tell me when they lose their pets. Is there a better way to address this than always saying, "I'm so sorry you went through that"? Hmm. Okay, good question. I think some of that might be determined by how old the children are in general and what your relationship is like with them. I think elementary school teachers tend to have more of an opportunity to build that kind of close connection where like their kids are telling them that that stuff is happening at home, whereas in like middle and high school you might not get that kind of information or that kind of conversation. um, I think as a starting point that's totally fair. Yeah, okay, K through second grade. Yeah, so wow, that's already really tough for kids who are just learning about their emotions and starting to experience them and put names to them, and then suddenly something big like that really happens. Okay, Jennifer, give me a second and I will get back to your question. So, Molly, I think as a follow-up, there are opportunities, I think, especially as you're in a K through 2 environment, maybe they have an opportunity to draw a picture or to write a story or tell you a story about their pets. Like, what was your favorite moment with your pet? What was the favorite thing that you like to do with them? What was their favorite snack or food? Um, what's something that what's a memory that you have of them that makes you smile? And this, none of this is to like get them to stop focusing on the loss, rather it's for them to engage with the love that they feel for their pet that now doesn't have an object attached to it anymore because that pet is no longer there. So again, I trust your expertise as a teacher to be able to figure out the right thing to do, but definitely, I think with most people it can be helpful for someone to invite them to engage with the emotion rather than just trying to kind of hustle them along and like, okay, like you're disrupting the class now, don't feel that anymore, let me tell you a joke so you can feel better. I think that's our discomfort with grief coming through instead of actually being able to support them in feeling that grief. Okay, Jennifer, I was briefly introduced to ACT in my trauma class last quarter. Any recommendations for learning more about ACT? Yeah, actually, I do have a partnership with Pezi where I get a lot of trainings at a very discounted rate. So if you are interested in that, I can post a link in the description for this video, as well as in the community tab later that you can definitely check out. It'll probably be the same training that I went through, and the presenter is awesome and really goes through each piece of the hexaflex and the background and how we kind of move from piece to piece really well. So that is a link that I can definitely add. I don't have that link on me right now, so that'll have to be later. So Jennifer, definitely check back later in the description when this uploads onto YouTube, and in the community tab, I'll post that as well. Yeah, Molly, for sure. My experience is not like I'm not great with younger kids. My wife will tell you that. Um, but I have found that like those creative outlets can be the way that they best engage with their emotions rather than the sit down and sit across from me and tell me all your feelings kind of thing. They don't have as much of a vocabulary for that yet necessarily, but it'll definitely show through in the way that they create. Yeah, Jennifer, for sure. I'll have that for you. And Natalie's got a comment here. My son died in his sleep 12 years ago. Wow. Still struggle with feelings of guilt surrounding his death. He's literally dying when I was at home, and I always wonder if I could have saved him. Wow. Yeah, Natalie, thanks for sharing that. In the video about Peyton Shires that I released earlier this week, I feel like as well as the Amanda Hickey video, just like I think there's a lot of opportunities for parents to feel guilty about I should have known or I should have done more, I should have done something. And I don't know exactly what it is about our society that seems to perpetuate that narrative that like parents should be perfect, but we really do feel that sometimes. And I can see that's still with you even after 12 years. And I think, especially with that guilt, that's really hard to feel, um, really hard to sit with that feeling, um, to allow that to be a to be in your Pyrex container, if you will, right? And to allow that to be there. Um, but yeah, that is such a tough situation, first of all. And again, like the best definition for trauma that I've heard is a normal response to an abnormal situation. I think that having that thought that like maybe I should have known or I should have done something is absolutely normal, but just in such a terrible and abnormal situation, um, that's just really stuck with you and persisted. So, yeah, I'm really sorry for that. I hope that over the years you've been able to talk to somebody or kind of work through some of the implications of that and those feelings so that you can continue living your life and being able to grieve in a way that works for you. But yeah, I mean, on that note, I think it's I think it's a good time for us to jump into a mindfulness exercise. Um, wow, we're turning into a support group here, and I'm loving it. I have to have you all sign like informed consent and confidentiality agreements next time. Um, Thank you all for sharing, and Beulah, you too. I really appreciate that. Like I said, I'd like to do some mindfulness work, and just as like an intro to it, I don't get into too much of the spiritual stuff or meditative stuff, and I want to emphasize that any mindfulness that we do, I'm not looking for you to feel a certain way at the end of it. The purpose of this is to engage with our emotions, whatever they might be. Now, I think the side effect of doing some deep breathing and being mindfully aware usually leads to relaxation and calm. But I recognize that that's not the primary purpose and it's not the experience that everyone has. So, I will be doing this along with you all. You can have your eyes open or closed. There will be times when I'm silent, and as much as I can control it, I'll still be here. But I'll be doing this right along with you all and guiding us through. We'll start with some deep breathing. I'll try to work, I'll walk us through some adjustments to move to more of a deep breathing, and we'll just be focusing on the breath at first. And then we'll do a mindfulness exercise where we're actually labeling our sensations into 3 different categories. The first is going to be thoughts, just things that I'm telling myself, feelings that might be a physical or an emotional sensation, and then judgments, which would be just an evaluation of what's going on. This is good, this is bad, this is boring, I don't like this, too much, too little, whatever. Those kinds of evaluative statements. And the goal is not to get a certain ratio of 1 to 1 to 1 or whatever, but the goal is just to be aware and to be able to label those. If you feel like you're judging a lot, evaluating a lot, that's okay. Just recognize that it's happening. And same if you feel like I have a lot of emotions right now, that's also okay. So I'm going to jump into it. I'm going to try to keep this to about 5 to 10 minutes, and I would appreciate you all's feedback at the end. So just go ahead and become aware of your body in the space that you're in right now. Again, you can have your eyes open or closed for this. I know for me, it helps me to stay focused if my eyes are closed, but you don't have to do that. And start to be aware of the surfaces that you are in contact with that are holding you up, keeping you up right now. Maybe it's your feet in contact with the ground. Maybe the seat that you are sitting on. Maybe there's an armrest that you're resting on. Just be aware of how your body feels in this moment, especially as we've been talking about some really heavy stuff right now. And now turn your attention to your breath and what it feels like to breathe. You might notice that as you breathe in, your shoulders, your chest, and your head tend to rise up and then sink back down as you breathe out. Think of this as the wave of your breath, a natural rhythm that your body engages in. And just let your body ride that wave for a few breaths. And now allow your exhales to lengthen just a little bit. You don't have to get it to the point where you're running out of breath or feeling like you can't get enough air. Just seeing if you might be able to exhale just a touch longer. And now go ahead and let your attention expand to what's going on in your mind, to the thoughts and the feelings that you might have. You might feel them in your mind or you might feel them in your body. And again, we're just allowing ourselves to label them. If it's a thought, something that I'm telling myself. If it's a feeling, something, a sensation that I experience either physically or emotionally. Or if it's a judgment, an evaluative way that I'm looking at something or thinking about something. And just allow yourself to label those without trying to change the content of your thoughts and your feelings. And now allow your mind to focus back on the experience of your breath. Go ahead and take 3 more deep breaths, and then we'll wrap up this mindfulness practice for today. All right. Well, thank you all for doing that with me. I'm going to hang out for a little bit. I'm curious what you all think and how it felt for you all. I know, like I said, the comments are a little delayed for me, so I'm going to try to be patient as the comments come in and you all share your experiences. In the vein of mindfulness, I am actually going to be publishing a video tomorrow reviewing the Balance app. Right now, they are offering a free year of Balance. And so you don't have to do any signups or anything for that. You just download the app, make an account, and you can access their meditations for a full year. So it's a mindfulness and meditation app. And so what I'm doing with my review is actually committing to doing 30 days straight of mindfulness work. I don't always make time for that myself. So this app is keeping me honest with that. And so then I feel like I can give a fair review of what the app actually offers and how I feel about it. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow, and I'll try to post an update every week as I'm going through the 30 days working with the app. I also got to make sure to get Jennifer that link. So I'm just writing notes for myself right now. All right, Jennifer, you liked it. Natalie loved it. Okay. Thank you all for your feedback. Really appreciate that. Beulah, haven't been that relaxed. Well, Beulah, I'm so glad for that. I think this is something that I'm going to keep doing because I think, like you all are talking about, people don't do this enough. We are really on the go a lot of the times. And I find that just finding a time to be by ourselves and be with our thoughts and really touch base with how I'm feeling is really important. So, yeah, thank you all for doing that with me. Thank you for your feedback, and I hope you'll be back for more. Eventually, I want to start doing mindfulness videos where there are like guided meditations. Obviously, like you see with the Balance app, that there's definitely a wealth of resources for that if you are interested in keeping up with being mindful on a regular basis. Thank you, Aaliyah. I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, with that, thank you all for your feedback. Again, thank you for doing this with me and hanging out with me this evening. I appreciate your time. And Um, so yeah, be on the lookout for that balance app video tomorrow, and then I'll have the podcast with different guests coming out here, hopefully in the next week or so. I've never joined. Yeah, Beulah for sure. So the mindfulness app, I'll have a link to that in the description in the video tomorrow if you want to download it on your phone. If not, I will try to do videos myself of guided meditations because I think that will be helpful for people. So be on the lookout for those. I don't have any in the works just yet, but it will be something that I branch out to eventually. So thank you all for hanging out with me today. Appreciate your time, and I will see you all next week.